Hi, everyone, and welcome to the News Agent podcast. I'm Suzy, Lycett, Content Manager at Goodlord, and today is another energy market update with our resident energy expert and Director of Tenancy Services, Rik Smith. So, hi, Rik. Nice to have you back on the podcast.
Great to be here.
Now, obviously, this is becoming a bit of a regular occurrence, and we're not out of the woods yet, I would say, in with regards to the energy crisis. I do think that we'll potentially be able to talk about things a bit more positively in our conversation today, perhaps slightly more so than we have done in the past. That's what I'm anticipating, but you may prove me wrong. But perhaps first for those listeners out there that haven't listened to our previous podcast recordings, I think we've had about 3 of these conversations in the past. If you could just tell us a bit about you and your background.
Sure thing. So my name is Rik. I'm the Director of Tenancy Services here at Goodlord. My background is very much in energy policy, including a degree on the topic. And then I spent quite a bit of time at British Gas, actually setting the price of gas and electricity for UK consumers. There were a few price increases and price reductions, which have, unfortunately, my fingerprints on. But then after that, I moved into the light when I joined Uswitch, the price comparison website, where I led very much on the interface between energy suppliers and the Uswitch business, helping get great deals for UK consumers. And that was all at the time when the message of switch and save X £100 was the message being drummed out there. And after Uswitch, I very much joined Goodlord in 2020 and helping bring and improve tenancy services for our tenants who are moving house, as well as helping our customers, our agent customers, make sure that everyone is set up in their homes as they move in. That's me.
Fantastic. That was a good summary. Now, today, the reason that we're talking about this today is obviously we had the spring budget that was yesterday as we're recording it now. There wasn't really in there much about the housing market and the rental market, but obviously energy and the cost of energy, it does have quite a global impact, obviously affects the budgets of tenants. And that's why it's something that we continue to talk about on these podcasts. Perhaps if you could kick us off really just by talking about what was announced with regards to the energy price guarantee and that support that's available for everybody to access.
Yeah, so that the headline is that the energy price guarantee is going to stay the same. Now, you might go, oh, so no change then. That's right. But it effectively means that the government has agreed to continue subsidising 26 million energy bills across the country for another 3 months. That's important because they were otherwise expected to go up from £2,500 to nearly £3,000. Now, this actually is one of the rare occasions where I get to say that this is a prediction that I made that came true. When we last spoke, Suzy, I suggested that we should keep an eye out for a little rabbit in the hat from the Chancellor. Now, this rabbit had actually made a little bit of an appearance in the previous weeks to where we are today. But nonetheless, the pressure placed on the government by the likes of Martin Lewis, as well as other consumer groups like Citizens Advice, has helped make the case to help maintain energy bills for the next 3 months. That's the sort of headline news. The other bit of the news that is actually welcome is that those on prepayment meters will actually see their energy prices reduce. Now, this is about the fact that energy prices for prepayment customers, those who have to top up with a key or a card or even on an app, before they use their energy, have previously had to pay a little bit extra because it is more expensive to service these meters, to have these keys, these cards, and to fund the mechanism of getting them topped up. And prepayment customers are going to see their energy bills go down by £45 a year. Now, that's a modest amount, but it is a very welcome amount for anyone who is otherwise paying that much more than anyone who paid by direct debit. But this does leave the fact that if you pay on receipt of a bill, if you wait for a bill to be sent to you, potentially in the post or by email, that remains the most expensive way of paying your energy bills. And so if you can, you should move to direct debit. And now the statement includes you should move to direct debit or prepayment. How long that cost parity will remain is to be confirmed, shall we say, but it is definitely a welcome respite for those who do choose to pay in advance of using their energy via a prepay meter.
And I think that the budget, when they were announcing it yesterday, I think that they commented that the Chancellor commented that it does tend to perhaps be people on lower incomes that might be paying those prepayment meters. As you say, it's quite a modest amount, but it is a boost in the right area, I suppose.
That's right. And whilst we're on the subject of prepayment, prepayment meters, of course, hit the news earlier in Q1 when it became apparent that some energy suppliers were, should we say, overreaching and forcing entry to properties in order to fit prepayment meters at addresses or for customers who have not been very good at paying their bills. Now, there are strict rules about how energy suppliers should behave when it comes to forcing entry to fit prepayment meters, and some of you listening may have actually had tenants who've had that happen to them. Nonetheless, Ofgem have now said that they're going to extend the moratorium and the ban on the force fitting of prepayment meters. So that's welcome news, and it's in effect whilst they work out what rules to put in place that is going to make sure that it's only done and under the most suitable of circumstances, rather than, as it's been reported, under too wide a remit.
What do you think about this, the level of support that's now in place, and do you think that it's sufficient to carry through for the coming months?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got to be mindful that here we are in March. Spring is approaching, summer is approaching. Gas bills should effectively be falling as we use less energy, not because the price changes, but because we just use less when it's warmer. So actually, there is a little bit of respite to come. Now, electricity usage doesn't really vary very much for those who heat their home by gas, and so actually, most people will see their energy bills on a monthly basis fall as we move into the spring and summer. Great. So actually, we should be looking forwards towards next winter when these energy rebates and credits really matter. So if we look at the predictions from energy analysts, Cornwall Insight, they're very much saying that actually, if the government hadn't acted, yes, the energy bills would have gone up come the 1st of April, but they have acted. So that takes us through from April through to the end of June. And so Q3, the expectation is that the mechanism called the energy price guarantee falls away, and we move back to the price cap mechanism. Fine. Either way, the expectation is that in Q3, which is from July to September, the expectation is energy bills would be about £2,100. And actually, that continues potentially into Q4. But the further out we look, the more it's possible that it can move. And so actually that is a reduction. You say, well, hey, that's great. That's £400 less than we're paying today on average. Great. Sounds like good news. So energy bill is going to be cheaper next winter, right? Wrong. So £2,100 is £400 less. Great. And actually that circumstantially lines up with the amount of bill credit that we all received over the past 6 months from the government. We all got £400 added to our electricity bills. And so that's welcome. That arrived in 66 or 67 pound chunks. Some people got it credited directly to their energy account. Some people got it credited back to their bank account. Prepayment customers, some received vouchers in the post that they can then add to their meter, etc. We should all have received that. So actually, this is beginning to line up that it's not going to be cheaper. It might be about the same. So it's a little bit, if you were struggling with energy bills this winter, the expectation is actually that it will be very similar next winter, unless there is further intervention. And the further intervention is unlikely to look like everyone gets £400. And the reason for that is that it's untargeted. It isn't helping the people most in need. It isn't helping the people who could afford to pay more. Not everyone wants to pay more necessarily, but could afford to pay more. And so actually the idea is that what we'd really like to see is more help, more than £400, being given to those most in need, and those least in need seeing less than that, or even no support at all. And so this is about the idea of helping those most in need. It's not easy. It is a difficult task to both identify who needs that help as well as to deliver it in a timely fashion. Remembering that these are private companies, they don't necessarily have access to the government databases of who is in receipt of benefits or any other kind of benefit, or even what their income is. And so as a result, these private companies are very much subjected to what can they deduce and what can they identify themselves, or the information they can be given by the government. But it is not straightforward. It is a difficult task.
And I guess from what you're saying as well, it isn't really a time for agents and landlords to kind of rest on their laurels and expect that part of the costs that their tenants are paying is just going to disappear now that it's just all going to go back to normal. It is something that agents and landlords are going to have to continue considering and into the future, from what you've said.
That's absolutely right. And the question of when do we go back to the land of switch and save, in terms of the return of the competitive energy market, it's likely that we're still quite some months off. It could very well be a Q3, Q4 type time when that incentive to switch and to reduce your bills by accessing a cheaper price is possible to return. There are a number of moving pieces that mean that isn't necessarily guaranteed later this year, but we will soon see how that pans out.
And would you have any, aside from the switching side of things, would you have any particular advice to give to agents and landlords that obviously are looking to introduce perhaps a bit of stability into their planning over the coming months? What could they be doing either differently, or what can they continue doing over the year, especially going into the summer? Costs are going to be dipping naturally because of the season, and then into the winter. How can they plan ahead for these fluctuations?
Yeah, so if you yourself are paying the energy bills for your tenants because you're offering a bills inclusive type renting arrangement, then make sure you're paying by direct debit. That's key thing. But also, insulate. You should be looking to how you can protect yourself from future price spikes, or even just reduce the bill overall by looking to insulate the properties, as well as a gentle reminder of the approaching deadline of circa 2025 for EPC level C being the minimum standard. So do watch out. So if you are looking for stability, then insulation is the way forwards, be it loft insulation, double glazing. These are all things that are options that you should be planning into the next opportunity you've got to deliver any improvements to your properties.
On that point, there was actually some research that was in the news this morning with Legal in General and their surveying team. It seems that double glazing was the most popular energy saving measure. I think it was around 86% of the services that the team provides is double glazing. And then it looks like wall insulation, there were 31% of surveyors said that they worked on that. Do you think that double glazing, with that being perhaps the most popular, do you think is there a reason for that? Is that the most energy efficient and cost effective? Are you surprised by that, or would you have put something else as your number one?
No, I'm not terribly surprised by that. There are still a large number of properties with single glazing in. In fact, I live in a house with sash windows, and they are the original single glazed windows. But I have secondary glazing as a way of trying to mitigate that. It's not surprising that double glazing is up there. But I would also suggest there is double glazing, but there is also triple glazing. If we look at the houses that are most highly performant, we look to countries like Germany and Scandinavia, and they are routinely installing triple glazing. Now, double glazing is great when replacing single glazed windows, not just because there's more glass, but because they tend to be more airtight. And so it's often that sealing of the air means that there is no longer those drafts. The cold air is not literally coming into the house and replacing the nice warm air, which gets pushed out the other side of the house. And so it's that double feature of making actually the surfaces letting less heat escape, as well as preventing the cold air from coming in and pushing out the warm air. So not a surprise. But with double glazing does come a change in the ventilation of a property. And so it's also important to make sure that the appropriate level of ventilation is included, trickle vents on those windows, as well as extractor fans in kitchens and bathrooms, etc. Is all part of making sure that we make sure that our tenants have nice warm homes, but also nice healthy homes with the appropriate level of humidity.
And that's obviously a very important point, particularly at the minute with issues with damp and mould in both social and private housing as well. I think that the government's obviously looking at cracking down slightly on that aspect and giving out better guidance really on what landlords can be doing, what tenants can be doing, because obviously there is a bit of a balance there. It isn't just making sure that there's better ventilation within a property. It's making sure that tenants are using that ventilation to make sure the conditions are right to not have damp and mold and things like that. So
that's right.
It's one of those ones I think that would have multiple benefits and sort of both the energy efficiency side as well as that standard of living that the government's pushing for too. So yeah, quite an important topic, that one. And obviously on the, again, looking at this particular report, there's mention of solar panels, heat pumps, smart energy meters, and so on, looking at kind of renewable energy, looking at different alternative sources of energy. And obviously in the budget yesterday, there was a bit of a focus on new energies, potentially looking at the future of the energy market for the UK and trying to create a bit more stability there, with carbon capture, looking at nuclear energy as well. What are your thoughts on that? What are your comments about that? Do you think those are the right routes to go down to create more stability in the market, to avoid this kind of situation that we find ourselves in now?
Yeah, I mean, we're all potentially sort of aware of the market dynamics and economics of rental properties, and if you make the market more attractive, maybe because of higher rents or lower barriers to entry, then in theory there should be more investors in that space. And that is what the government is trying to do, but on a somewhat grander scale when it comes to nuclear and carbon capture. So on the nuclear side of things, they're effectively saying that they're going to classify, which is a paperwork exercise, the energy that is produced from nuclear power stations as, in effect, green energy. Which sort of means that then opens up the door to more private money who want to invest in green energy and begin to access the benefits and potentially the tax breaks and investment vehicles that come with that classification. So it's the idea of trying to open up and make a bit of a market more attractive. The other thing that is, it's a little bit of a running joke with those that follow these things. The carbon capture and storage allocation of £20 billion over 20 years is it's the same thing that keeps getting announced over and over again. For at least the past 10 years, another £1 billion has been announced for carbon capture and storage, but we are not actually running any commercial carbon capture and storage anywhere. So let's just talk a little bit about what that is. Carbon capture and storage is the idea that you could still keep burning coal, you could still keep burning gas in a big power station, but what you do is it's a big vacuum cleaner on the top of it, and you take that carbon dioxide and then you pump it and you capture it. That's the carbon, and that's it being captured. And then you've got to pipe it to somewhere and store it. And you sort of go, oh, well, where are we going to store it? We've been previously storing it in the atmosphere. The idea is actually to store it underground, where we would otherwise have been pumping gas from. You sort of go, okay, well, that sounds okay. But the reality is that this capturing and storage is actually very energy intensive. So it takes quite a bit of energy to run the machines that do this. And then you've also got to have some confidence that the storage is going to remain stored and not escape. Otherwise, you've kind of defeated the whole object. And so it is a technology, it is a mitigation technology. It is one that we're likely to have available to us at the time when most of our energy is generated from renewables, which includes nuclear. Then there is likely to be the need to burn small amounts of gas for electricity generation. And what we would like to do is to be able to capture it. So it's trying to invest in a piece of technology which is seen as a important part of the future. But again, it never really comes to fruition. I'm not gonna directly compare it to fusion energy, which has always been 20 years away. Maybe carbon capture and storage will be 20 years away as well.
Okay, well, that's great. I mean, so we've discussed that, therefore, on the supply side, that kind of future-looking perspective, really, as to what the government's doing to kind of create a bit more security on the supply side. What about demand? Because obviously demand is quite high for energy. What could we be doing in terms of reducing that level of demand?
So this is where we start looking at energy efficiency. And in fact, we've talked before about my enthusiasm for more energy efficiency to be rolled out across the country. And actually, there are a couple of things that are coming out. So yes, there's the EPC regulations coming in and encouraging EPC level C. Do check your EPC, see whether that is on your agenda. But also, the government, the day after the budget, have actually just announced the Energy Efficiency Task Force. You sort of go, okay, well, that sounds grand. That sounds amazing. And fundamentally, what they're trying to do is they're trying to reduce the UK's energy demand by 15% by 2030. And that's comparing to energy use levels from 2021. And this is households, businesses, the whole UK. And so that's why it's really important that we get things right. Now, that's a really positive move from the government. Like, yes, we've got the intention, but actually what they've done is they've basically said, Avengers assemble, and now let's come up with some ideas. Like, they're not starting with ideas, which actually in instances like this can be seen as a good thing. They're not picking winners. They're not saying this is the solution for everybody. They're actually saying, let's take an informed, considered view, and are inviting industry experts, people who are doing this on the ground all day, every day, to contribute to that task force. So that's a good move, but it's not going to solve anything for next winter. And so we talked about the supply, getting electricity and gas available to the UK. Now, we sorted out this winter 22. Winter 23 is going to be the next challenge. And it is very much dependent upon what other countries are doing, what we do in order to source the gas, as well as reduce our demand for that gas.
That makes complete sense. And I think that, as you say, it's good that they are taking on board different views. And I do think that there are obviously other countries and things that have taken the right approach. I think you've mentioned previously that Germany, for example, they are doing some good things there. And I think that could almost help us out if we're looking at the supply that we need over the winter. If they don't have the same levels of supply, then that's going to help us out, which is a good thing too.
That's right. And the UK sometimes falls into this British exceptionalism, this idea that we are somehow unique and different, and doing what other people do must therefore be wrong. And quite the opposite. This is very much a global, pan-European effort in order to drive down the dependence upon Russian gas and imported gas. And that's what we all need to be sharing good ideas about and pulling together on.
And as you say, there are obviously these EPC changes on the horizon, which landlords, agents are going to have to get stuck into and look for different solutions if their properties need to be upgraded to become more energy efficient. I know that on our news agent site, we do have a couple of free resources, one for tenants outlining some of the financial support that they can get to help with their energy bills, but another one for landlords that are potentially looking for different sources of finance for boosting their energy efficiency of their properties. So I'll pop the links for those into our show notes just to give some ideas there, because it's definitely something that landlords obviously need to be considering now.
That's for sure. And don't forget, there are grants out there available to help improve the EPC rating of properties. Now, if we just look at one example, for instance, yes, there's Eco 2, Eco 4 now, which is being rolled out by energy suppliers, but there is also the Warmer Homes grants that are out there available for £5,000 to £25,000 to help improve very poor energy efficiency rating property, E, F, and G, limited amounts for D-rated properties, but it is dependent upon the occupiers of the property. Tenants is what we're talking about here, and so if their household income is low or means tested, we're talking about below £30,000, or in some areas below £20,000, then you can access or apply to the Warmer Homes funds in order to get that money towards these energy efficiency improvements. It's definitely worth searching for Warmer Homes on Google, and Warmer Homes, for instance, London is administered by the Mayor of London and the London Assembly. So there are different schemes. They're being administered locally, but there is some money available. It's not an enormous amount, some to help push forwards the energy efficiency of our home.
Well, I think that there are some good ideas there, and some. I can't say it's necessarily been the entirely positive conversation that I anticipated at the beginning of the podcast, but it does look like the government is taking steps to look at the supply and then look at the reducing of demand and creating more energy efficiency in properties. There are these different financial schemes that landlords can start to look into. Every little helps in that sense. So I think that we're starting to move perhaps in the right direction. Obviously, it's not all going to sort itself out overnight. We do have next winter to consider and make sure that we have things in place. But hopefully the energy crisis, having been ongoing for a little while now, will perhaps be better prepared to deal with that. And landlords and agents will be able to have those conversations with their tenants appropriately when the time comes.
That's right. And yeah, there are things to be optimistic about. Energy prices are falling. There is the view that oil prices are also falling. So a bit of respite from the cost of living doesn't mean prices are going to go in reverse. But that rate of inflation is hopefully softening now with these lower prices feeding through.
There we go. That's the positive ending that I was looking for. So thanks ever so much, Rik, for speaking with me again today. It's been interesting as always.
A pleasure.